Well, hello guys, and thank you for joining this second lesson. I would like to start this one with a short poem by Charles Bukowski. This is called An Answer to a Critic of Sorts. A lady will perhaps meet a man because of the way he writes, and soon the lady might be suggesting another way of writing. But if the man loves the lady, he will continue to write the way he does. And if the man loves the poem, he will continue to write the way he must. And if the man loves the lady and the poem, he knows what love is, twice as much as any other man. I know what love is. This poem is to tell the lady that. Interesting one about the influence that other people may have on us, and how not necessarily we need to reject it in a rude way, but there are things to connect that, right? Well, on the first lesson, we basically talk about the purpose of the subject. We place literature into the the toolbox for our pedagogical practice. That is like the most important in this subject. And we presented some of the advantages or positive things or good things that we can expect when using literature, right? Like good consequences or positive things. Well, in this one, in this particular lesson, we are going to talk about the problems with literature, because not everything is good about it. Actually, we have like a lot of problems with it, a lot of also potential negative things as we had potential good things. And of course, the good thing of knowing about difficulties in advance is that we can create alternatives, solution plans, or try to minimize the negative impact of certain literatures. Uh, since the very moment that we select the text and we choose the text, we can avoid many of these problems that I'm going to mention. And some others are unavoidable. You're going to find them somehow. Um, but the important is that we are aware of those, so we can try and find some solutions or some possibilities for working about them. Uh, so, if you can be so kind and go to the slide number 14, we are going to find the first of the problem, and it is grading. Please, be very aware that when I talk about grading, I am not talking about grades or marks from 0 to 5 or from 0 to 10. I'm not talking about the traditional perception of evaluation. No, it's not that. That is a problem on its own that we as teachers normally deal with. But no, in this case, I am mentioning or referring to something different, right? And it's this. Sometimes we have uncommon vocabulary. Yes, this vocabulary can be dated, specialized, or archaic. Yes, uh, dated and archaic are sort of the same. Yes, when we have vocabulary, expressions, grammar, syntax that is not very common these days, and that may present a problem in terms of understanding. And if it comes in a frequent way, if it happens a lot, so it's possible that it becomes dull and boring and frustrating for students, right? Then we have the other side, that is specialized vocabulary, and it's a vocabulary that is not necessarily old or archaic or not current, but what may happen is that it belongs to a very specific field of knowledge. So, for example, if you are going to read Moby Dick, this American classic novel, um, you require to know, or at least to have at hand, uh, some references about sailing. Yes, about whale boats. Yes, these ships that are hunting whales. because there's a lot of specialized vocabulary related to the boat, to the instruments, to the vocabulary of the sea, of the currents, of the weather, of the ranks of the personnel of the boat, of certain folklore, of certain sayings, well, a lot of different things, right? So that can be specialized. If you are going to read an article on pedagogy or on didactics, so most likely you need to know a little bit of education to understand it, because let's say a regular person may be unable to completely understand that, right? So that may be a problem that you need to anticipate. And then we may have problems in terms of syntax or the structure, right? So for example, if we're going to deal with poetry, it is pretty common that poetry does not follow the usual standards or structures of grammar, and that may combine words in different orders. Or it may happen, for example, also with songs, that in order to preserve the rhyme or the rhythm or the musicality, so they change or adapt words or pronounce it in different ways or place the accent in different ways, and that may be problematic, right? Because not everybody is aware of that, and it may be threatening for the student. It may be sometimes frustrating if you don't deal that with care. Okay, so here we have a couple of examples of that. Yeah, and I have my roomie again, and I have an example over here of a fragment by William Shakespeare, the Hamlet play, right? And I'm going to read it for you. Please just follow it because it's important. It says, thou, the stars are fire, thou that the sun doth move, thou truth to be a liar, but never doubt I love. So if you're not aware or familiar of this sort of expressions, you are going to find this little fragment that is only a little piece of the play really difficult to get. Yes, so let me ask you, Dora time, about the unknown words. Yes, so for some of you, I'm almost sure that it's very possible that you don't know what does it mean, thou, the first one, and that it's even like difficult to pronounce, right? The thou, thou, that is the way it is pronounced. So probably you don't know what is that. Yeah, probably you don't know what is doth. Yes, the sun doth move, doth. You don't know that, right? Well, let me try to explain this. Thou is the personal pronoun you in ancient English. So thou means you, and then the word doth, it's also an old form of the verb do or does, right? So in this case, this doth, it's going to mean does. Well, if we're going to use the agreement, right, between the noun son and the verb, it should be in third person. So if we are going to paraphrase this in a clearer way, it may be something like, you can doubt that the stars are fire, right? Like if you want to doubt, if you don't want to believe me, you can doubt that the stars are fire. Now, the stars are fire? Yes, of course, in a very let's say figurative way, but sure, the stars are balls of gas that normally burn, and we can say that is what we can call stars. Yes. Doubt that the sun does move. Okay, so you can doubt if you want. If you don't want to believe in anything, you can even doubt that the sun moves. Yes. This is a tricky one, right? Because back at the time of Shakespeare, people believed that it was the sun that moved around the planets, or moved around the earth, because we thought that we were like the center of the universe. Later on, we realized that was not true, right? But let's say that by the time it was a definitive truth and an unavoidable truth. Like everybody believed that, right? So basically, that is the second one. Then the third one says, doubt truth to be a liar. Like you can doubt or you can hesitate about the truth being a lie, which of course doesn't make sense. Now, if something is truth, it's because it's the complete opposite of a lie. So basically, the first three verses are things that are supposed to be completely true, right? Like the stars and the sun and the true, right? So you can doubt of the undoubtful, but in the end, never doubt that I love. Yeah. So basically, it is like a declaration of love, saying I love you above anything else, and you can doubt of everything that is certain except than me, right? So that is an example of grading, you see, in which it is demonstrated that it's a little bit difficult sometimes to manage this grading with archaic vocabulary, with different organization of words and all that. And then we have this second part, lack of homogeneity, and it means that it is not homogeneous, that it's a text sometimes that may have formal discourse in the first paragraph, and then we may go to maybe a gang slang in the next paragraph or the next chapter, or maybe it can combine modern English with old English, right? So all of those combinations and possibilities are nice and enriching, but they can be frustrating, right, for students, and they may pose a threat if you don't deal with them properly. You just throw them into their face without any sort of intermediation. It may be difficult for them, or it may be not so good. So grading is one problem, right? Now here we have in the second one a linguistic model, right? This very text, I'm going to use it as well later on when we arrive like on the third period, the Renaissance one, on literature in 10th semester, because I think that it is very good. It sort of gives us the perfect example for what we're trying to do. And is that normally in school, in university, in let's say formal places or formal organizations or institutions for education, we're always teaching or encouraging students to speak correctly, to write correctly, to use the grammar, to use the correct sentences, not to use questions, for example, only with intonation. Normally, we're always, nagging them with, you know my name? No. Do you know my name? You are my friend? No. Are you my friend? Right? So we're sometimes very strict with that. Well, it happens that sometimes literature is not strict at all, and it's the complete opposite. Yes, it contradicts what we are saying in class. Yes. So it may happen that students may get confused, may say, hey, but you are all the time, explaining us about formal English and everything else. But, if we are reading a book in which people speak wrongly, yes, we are going to make mistakes, and that is going to be bad for us. So this is a fragment from The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn that is a masterpiece of literature. It is well recognized as one of the most important ones. Many schools in the United States read this book, and many schools, even in some other non-native speaking, English-speaking countries, also read it. So its authority or its relevance is not discussed, right? Nevertheless, take a look at this. I'm going to read a fragment of it. Yes, this is spoken by a slave, a black person that is one of the protagonists of the book, and that of course it speaks in this way because that is the way that they spoke back then, because of his cultural status, his level of education, the oppression that he suffered as a slave, yes, all of it. So let me read it for you. So it says something like, "Goodness gracious, is that you, Huck? And you ain't dead? You ain't drowned it? Just back again. It's too good for true, honey. It's too good for true. Let me look at you, child. Let me feel of you. No, you ain't dead. Just back again. Live and sound. Just the same old Huck. The same old Huck. Thanks to goodness." And this is exactly the way it is written in the book, right? You see that there are many mistakes, if we're going to call them that way, such as the dad with a D, right, instead of the THAT, and instead of and, ain't, what, sometimes ain't, it's still used as a negation, not really formal, but it can be used. Drowned it, yes, that is actually a mistake over there. Use instead of you are, you is, and all of these different ones. Now I put a sort of a translation down there, if you want to take a look at it, in the correct way in which it should be said. So this may create a conflict between what you're saying and what you make them students, making students read, right? Now it doesn't mean that you cannot find this or use this. Of course, it could be an excellent tool to try to identify the correct way of saying things. So an exercise such as finding the mistakes, or simply making people aware of the cultural side of the time. No, but as a challenge, you can turn it into an opportunity. As a difficulty, you can make it something good. Let's take a look, for example, of the number 16. We can go from in the slide number 15. There is something pretty informal from a slave, from a person that is uneducated and that it's kind of hard but really not good at speaking, to the 16, something that it's so informal that we don't know what is that. Yes, like we don't really get it. We don't understand it. Yes. So take a look at this. There is a conversation between Jack and Algernon. This is a fragment from The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde. That is the same guy who wrote The Portrait of Dorian Gray, right? So I can even picture, these two pretty perfect, a little bit effeminate English gentlemen, British to the bone, speaking about these different things, no? So it says, "This ghastly state of things is what you call bumbering, I suppose." And Algernon replies, "Yes, and a perfectly wonderful Bunbury it is. The most wonderful Bunbury I have ever had in my life." "Well, you no right whatsoever to Bunbury here. This is absurd. One has a right to Bunbury anywhere one chooses. Every serious Bunburyist knows that." Now, did you know what they're talking about? Did you get anything of that? There are some different vocabularies that are, or different words that are maybe difficult to get for some of you, such as ghastly, such as you have no right whatsoever. Well, all these different ones, right? And most importantly, Bunbury, right? What is that? What the hell is Bunbury? Well, so if you go into the next page, there's a definition in there, but let's say that the summary is that when you don't want to do something, when you don't want to go anywhere, or you had an appointment and you want to cancel it or something like that, you invent or fabricate the fantasy of a relative that is very ill and that you need to go visit that person, right? So in order to cancel your plans, in order to not going to class, or not going to a party you don't want to, or whatever, so you just invent or create or make up that you have a relative who is very sick, and that's why you can go. So that's it. So if you don't know that, in this particular novel, play, that is a play, one of the protagonists invented this Bunbury relative who was sick, well, it will be impossible to get, right? So it is difficult if it's pretty informal, but it's difficult as well if it gets pretty formal and not really easy to get, right? And finally, we're going to talk about relevance, right? That is in the slide number 18. And that is the first one, right? Language unlikely to be used in everyday life. Sometimes, and especially with the classic works of literature, we have a lot of words, a lot of vocabulary, a lot of structures, ideas, etc., that are not pretty used in everyday life. I mean, you can go with a very basic English, and people would understand. So it's a very valid interrogation of students if they tell you, well, teacher, why are we reading this if I'm never going to use it, right? So it's important to select your books in a way in which the vocabulary, the ideas, the trends is relevant for them, and that if it is not directly relevant, at least it has like a second possibility of use. Okay, we're not using the word bomber right now, but if you want to have a secret conversation, that it may come in handy. Or if you would like to get to know how people were 100 years ago, you might want to read this short novel of 80 pages instead of reading two books of 300 pages. Well, there are a lot of different things. It's up to you and your creativity and the possibility of justifying this to students, no? But you need to know that you are going to be faced to that. Like, why? What is the point? Yes, why is so useful or not? Okay? Then in the second part, and something that I'm pretty sure that many of you have wondered or are wondering right now, and it's that appreciation of art and literature is not necessarily a concern of language teaching, right? So you can go all your life teaching English, yes, and teaching grammar and whatever, and never mention Shakespeare or Dickens or knowing about Hemingway or knowing anything about Edgar Allan Poe, and that's fine. Probably that's not your interest, right? That's not what you would like to know about, and your materials and your teaching resources go in a different way. Probably you would prefer talking about Facebook or social networks instead of Virginia Woolf, and that's fine, right? So that is why, that is why it might be a difficulty, like for you yourself as a teacher to convince yourself that it's necessary or relevant or important to use literature for this. So you need to start from yourself. If you believe that yourself, you believe that literature is useless and it's not going to help you at all, probably have taken another elective, right? But hopefully I can convince you somehow through the course of this subject that there are certain things that can be done with literature that can be good, that can be fun for some people, but definitely that it can be relevant for many of you. And then we have the difficulty of the selection of text. Yes, so do we want to read full books? Do we want to read full tales? If we're going to read novels, we read them full or just one part? Are we going to read series? What is the level of difficulty that we are going to use? Well, all these different things that may be at some point problematic, right? So you may ask, like, why should I waste or spend so many time deciding this if I don't know, if I have the textbook and they have readings and text over there and I don't have to prepare anything and everything's ready, right? So remember that we're talking about difficulties, that it's a conundrum, a difficulty, or let's say a crossroad, a mental crossroad that you may find yourself in at some point. So all of these are difficulties that you're required to face, that you're required to know that you will face. So anticipate them, yes, and minimize them and try to attack them since the very beginning. Okay. So hopefully we were able to get everything that we have in here in terms of lesson 1, the positive or the good reasons for teaching literature, and in this lesson number 2, the difficulties or let's say the problems that we're going to face, right? So from here, let's talk about the second assignment, and we are going to start reading the books right now. As I tell you, like from the beginning, try to read them since from the very beginning, So what you're going to do right now is this. At this moment, you're required to read at least the first 10 pages of your book. The book that you selected, you need to read them, yes, and read minimum the first 10 pages. If you have already read them, excellent. If you want to read more than 10, excellent. But you are going to do that, okay? And please, you are going to take the 3 advantages or the 3 positive things and the 3 problems that we have in literature, and you are going to tell me in that assignment if they are present in your book. Yes? So in the first one, you can say, for example, well, let's say that we are going to use this book, yes, by Charles Bukowski. And we're going to take the first 3, right? That is internalization, yes? Does this book have a lot of vocabulary? Sure, so that could be perfect. It has a lot of vocabulary, a lot of different words, a lot of different things that can be nice in terms of learning new things. So sure, check. Internalization, this has a pretty good internalization potential. Then it has a genuine context. Does this have a genuine context? More or less, it depends. Yes, this is a poem, this is a book about love poems, and if my students are going to be in the age in which they may be more sensibilized or let's say aware of their feelings or open to these emotions, well, it might be a good context. But if I am presenting this to a group of primary schoolers, well, it's going to be a complete waste of time because they are not interested in this, right? So that will be the thing related to a genuine context. So let's say that the answer for this book, it will be, it depends, right? Then motivation, again, if my public is about students who may want to write poems themselves or may want to get to know a little bit more about expressing these feelings, excellent. But if it's, I don't know, if my public is a group of executives who use English for business, well, they wouldn't care about this most likely, yes? It's a possibility. So you see, I took the 3 variables and analyzed my book to them. Didn't took a long time, like didn't write complete paragraphs. Just with 2 or 3 sentences, I was able to determine if the whole book, in your case, if your first 10 pages are likely or no, likely or not. Then we go with the next one, with the difficulties. So does this have a problem of grading? Well, not so much. Let's say that the vocabulary over here, it is rich, but not necessarily complicated. It is not archaic, it is not old. So in that part, it is good. Now we have a huge problem in the second part, the linguistic model. Why? Because this book is full of bad words, of swearing words. Yes, let's say that these poems are really particular, and some of them are pretty sexual, yes, or some of them use words such as shit or fuck or whatever. That may be fine, maybe for a group of students of university like you, but not for a school, but not for a primary school, not for an institution or something like that, right? And the relevancy, well, for some people, love can be irrelevant if they don't like it. So hope you get the point of my example over here. You simply have to take the 10 pages of your book, the first one, or whatever amount of pages you have read, and just analyze it and write that into the assignment, okay? It's important that you know that sure we're going to have some lessons and some videos, yes, but in this particular subject, there's a lot of work on your side, yes, because remember that you're sort of preparing activities and ideas and even a lesson plan in the end for your teaching practice, right? So hopefully you understand that the assignments many times are more important than the videos. The videos are going to provide like a context and some general information, but you're going to do the rest, okay? So hopefully everything's clear. If you have any questions, just let me know, and see you in the next video. Thank you very much. Hugs.